that we show the difference between the parties as we go forward to hold the gavel for the people, for the children. I'm very delighted to be joined today by a very special guest. Zoe Lofgren, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, is Madam Chair in many respects. She's chair of the House Administration Committee. If I need anything on Capitol Hill, I have to go to Zoe Lofgren, and so will all the other members. She's considered the mayor of Capitol Hill. She's also the chair of the Immigration Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee. She also is a leading member of the January 6th Select Committee and commands a great deal of respect in the Congress. As chair of House Appropriations, she is dealing with two issues that you all have expressed an interest in. One, the voter protection bills that are before the Senate now, as well as how we are dealing with COVID in the Congress and in the country from our perspective in the House of Representatives. We'll be hearing from her in a moment. But first, I just want to give you a report apropos of the request that you have made. Zoe will talk about the Voting Rights Act, but voter protection bills, as well as Voting Rights Act. But please know that there is nothing more important that Congress has to do than to pass this legislation. Zoe has been there from the start. As I say, she'll address it, but I just want to put it into perspective of everything that we do is affected by how elections are, the sanctity of the vote is respected, how voters have the ability to go to the polls in a way that it has equity and respectful of the position and the neighborhood in which they live, as well as how we stop the suppression of the vote, as well as the nullification of elections, as well as we honor grassroots voices with matching funds, as well as how we snuff out big, dark, special interest money there to suffocate the airwaves. That's the outside of it. The inside of it, we'll hear from Zoe. BBB, Build Back Better. Aren't we proud of our president? President Joe Biden has really brought transformative legislation to the fore in this past year. I think it's really important for Democrats to brag about what we have been doing, and we have to do so in a more forceful way, a more unified way. Under his leadership, President Biden has already produced 6 million jobs. His predecessor was producing 30,000 jobs a month. He's already produced 6 million jobs with his initiatives. They were there. What we did at the beginning, the rescue package, which introduced the child tax credit, the initiatives to put vaccines in arms, money in pockets, children safely in school, and people back to work. The infrastructure bill, well, where the Republicans voted no and took the dough, is something very popular across the country. Members have had nearly 1,000 events across the country already promoting what is in that legislation. We had our 5 in San Francisco, joined by Zoe and others of our members from the region. Other members across the country have had their meetings as well. So the infrastructure bill is very important. And one important element of it is equity, that we are correcting past mistakes, not putting in infrastructure that divides communities, but eliminating those kinds of projects to unify communities, to do so with equity, with a 40% equity requirement. And now, of course, BBB, to build back better. The infrastructure is good. We're building back better there, but we need to be even better than that with equity. And also to save the planet. $500 billion in the legislation to address the climate crisis. This is historic. Nothing like it. Need to get it passed, and we must get it passed. But in addition to that, one of the preeminent parts of the bill relates to a preeminent issue in America's households and across the country, and that's the healthcare issue. When we talk about healthcare, we're talking about addressing issues that relate to disability. We have a strong home health care initiative in the legislation. We have something I'm very proud of when we talk about healthcare is to address the fact that in 12 states, Medicaid was not expanded, but in this legislation, we don't expand Medicaid, we expand Affordable Care Act by drawing Medicaid eligible people into Medicare for practically no cost to them. That's millions of people now having coverage, taking us closer, very close to universal coverage. Of course, we want the coverage to be as good as it possibly can be, and that is also our constant quest. So there's more funding, and again, BBB, whether it's talking about child tax credit, whether it talks about child care, whether it talks about universal pre-K, whether it talks about, as I mentioned, home health care. All of these initiatives enable women and people of color and others to be more prominent in the workplace and have their work rewarded. It's also about equity, again, having fairness in what we do, but it's about ownership as well, so that women and minority-owned businesses can have their shot at whatever government contracts are coming out from the infrastructure bill and the BBB when we're talking about climate and the rest. So this is transformative, but people tell me, don't use the word transformative, just say it lowers cost. It lowers cost for healthcare, whether it's home healthcare, those costs for families across America. It lowers cost for child care. It enables so much more to happen. So we're very, very proud of the legislation. Now we just have to get it passed. And what all that I said about it, it creates jobs, it lowers taxes for families, it lowers costs for families, and it is fully paid for by making everyone, wealthiest and corporate America, pay their fair share. So BBB, voting rights, the rescue package, which we did at the beginning of the year, job creation. Joe Biden has done a remarkable job. We're very proud of him. Now we have to make sure that people know. So I hope that you'll be a force with us in all of that, because what we want to do, launch today, is how we can work together on a regular basis. Many of you are our volunteers in politics, our VIPs. You've heard me say it over and over again. Our inside maneuvering can only accomplish so much. Without the outside mobilization, we cannot be fully successful. So thank you for your outside mobilization. And now with that, go back to my motto. We don't agonize, we organize. And let's say that today will be the start of our organizing for 2022, for which we've been building a foundation. With that, it's now my privilege to yield the floor, as we say in Congress, to our distinguished colleague from the state of California. Oh, and did I say Zoe also chairs the California Democratic delegation. She was absolutely masterful in managing all of the conversations week in and week out, day in and day out on redistricting. The positive reaction we have in California is due to the leadership of Zoe Lofgren. So politically, policy, in every way, for the people, Zoe Lofgren is a leader. So I yield the floor to you.
Well, thank you so much, Nancy. And I want to wish you a happy new year. And also thank you for the service you are providing to our country. You know, as a student of history, we all are. I don't think there is anyone who can match the skill of Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. She is the most effective speaker the Congress has ever seen, and we should all be grateful for that, because we have a very slim majority in the House of Representatives, and of course, we're tied in the Senate. But even with those very slim majorities, Nancy has been able to help us find consensus and move forward for the good of the American people. One aspect of that, as we come up to the January 6th anniversary, that sad day when a violent mob attacked the Congress. She has put together a bipartisan select committee that's working very hard to uncover every fact about that day and the days leading up to that day. And although we are not done, it's very clear that in addition to the violence, there was intention to the violence. The intention was to replace the individual, Joe Biden, who'd been elected by the American people and the Electoral College, with the loser of the election, former President Donald Trump, to essentially overturn our constitutional form of government. And I'm grateful to the officers who protected us, protected the Senate and the House, the Vice President from violence, but even more important is they protected our democracy from failing that day. Now, we will get to the bottom of everything that happened, but we already know there's things that we have to do to protect our democracy, and Nancy certainly touched upon them. You're well aware that we passed H.R. 1, the For the People Act, not once but twice in the House, a great bill that was marked up through the House Administration Committee with our jurisdiction on elections, as well as the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, where our election subcommittee headed by G.K. Butterfield had hearings all over the United States, and the Judiciary Committee, where I also serve, reported out that bill, and we sent that to the Senate. And since then, of course, because of their arcane rules, we have not seen progress. We have worked very closely, however, with the Senate, and we have a bill. It's being called the compromise bill that Senator Joe Manchin has endorsed, the Freedom to Vote Act. And I wanted to just go through some of the elements, because when you hear compromise, you might wonder, well, is this really going to provide the protection that our democracy needs? And although it's not everything I wanted to do, that was in H.R. 1, it is a very strong bill, and it will do the job in protecting the democracy that we all hold so dear. It provides for protection of voting rights, registration, as well as funding for compliance, early voting, voting by mail, and promoting voter access through voter modernization. It also, although there is a voter ID provision, which we have had grave qualms about, the provisions are such that you can use a student ID, a utility bill, the list goes on. And if you can't come up with any of those dozens of identifiers, you can find someone who's known you for 6 months or more to attest that you are who you are and vote anyhow. So we believe in some ways this will, by putting a bottom line that is actually doable for voters, it will protect against more extreme provisions that have been put up by Republican partisans across the United States. We have also protected voter registration lists. We've done something else that we didn't do in H.R. 1, and I'll tell you why. It never occurred to us that the Republicans would go so far as to monkey with the actual administration of elections themselves, that they would go in and replace nonpartisan election officials with partisan hacks to affect the outcome of the election. But we see in many states that is what is underfoot right now, what the speaker referred to as election subversion. So we, in working with the Senate, we have put together provisions that would prevent that restricts the removal of election administrators, that prevents voter intimidation and intimidation of election workers, that protects election records and gives judicial protection to the right to vote and nonpartisan vote tabulation. So we think we've got a very tight provision to prevent the subversion that we fear and looks to be ongoing. We have other provisions that were in HR 1, for example, preventing foreign interference. But the other thing we've got in from HR 1 is we have to have paper ballots where we can go back and actually ascertain who won the election. That is in there as well. You know, we've all seen our nonpartisan commission here in California work through to get election districts. Maybe everybody isn't happy with them, but there was no partisanship. This was just an effort to do the right thing by a group of disinterested citizens. We're not seeing that in states. We've got states where Republican legislatures are basically skewing the redistricting process in such a way that even if you get 55 or 60 or more percent of the vote, you can't get a majority of the seats in the House. We have gerrymandering provisions, not only in terms of the Voting Rights Act, but to prevent extreme partisan maps. When the Supreme Court last looked at it, they said, well, how would we know? How would we be able to monitor that? We are going to provide a formula so that all they need to do is apply the formula. And we have a right to do that under Article 1, Section 4 of the United States Constitution. We continue on with, as Nancy said, the Honest Ads Act and campaign transparency and fundraising. But we also know that if we do just that, we won't have protected our democracy. One of the things that our January 6th committee is looking at is possible reforms to the Electoral Count Act. Now, the Electoral Count Act was written in the 1800s. There are ambiguities, although it's very clear that what our colleagues tried to do to overturn the election was not permissible either by the Electoral Count Act or the 12th Amendment of the Constitution. But to protect ourselves in the future, we're looking at tightening up the language of the ECA. We haven't introduced the bill yet because we're still discussing the details. We're hoping to have a bipartisan bill on this, but essentially to prevent just one senator from throwing chaos into the count by having at least 1/3 of each house object, and to defining what the objections can be, and to delineating protections in the judicial branch to prevent mischief such as being contemplated today. We are also working with our Senate counterparts to streamline the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and I think we have some consensus on that. So having said that, how do we move forward? Senator Chuck Schumer issued a letter just today indicating that we need to proceed, that he intends to proceed on January 17th, and that the filibuster has been adjusted many times over the history of the United States. I don't believe that the Senate is in a position to eliminate, I don't think they're going to eliminate the filibuster, but adjustments have been made. And he quoted the late Senator Byrd saying, the dead hand of the past can't control the future. And of course, Senator Byrd took a lead in making some adjustments. So we're hopeful that that will be the case, because actually, if we don't protect voting rights, if we don't protect against the kind of un-American mischief to overturn elections in the future, nothing else we do will matter. And so I want to thank each of you, you VIPs, for stepping up to the bat to make sure that this most important thing gets the attention it needs. And hopefully we accomplish these bills to protect our beautiful democracy. So Happy New Year again. I look forward to working with all of you, and of course, our absolutely fabulous Speaker Pelosi. And I yield back, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Zoe, for your presentation. I have a couple questions that have sprung from the chats here, but first I want to thank Cheryl and Hope for interpreting for us. Thank you so much. We're honored that you're with us today, and all those that you are communicating with. Two things. One is, and just to revisit, the question is, what will these bills do about all the laws that are being passed across the country to undermine the integrity of the vote, the sanctity of the vote, whether it's voter suppression or nullification of results or punishing those who are there to oversee the elections and replace them with others. So if you could speak to those aspects of the bill, I think it's very encouraging for people to hear.
Well, if we can pass these bills, they will supersede the state actions that are taking place as to federal elections. Now, I'm just pulling up my Constitution of the United States, something that I keep with me at all times. Mm-hmm. Article 1, Section 4 says that the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. But here's the important next phrase. But the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations. So that's what we would be doing. We would be making or altering those regulations or laws by protecting the integrity of the count, by prohibiting the anti-democratic provisions that block voting and the like. And this would supersede state law. And as our former Attorney General said, the anti-gerrymandering provisions will also affect the outrageous redistricting efforts that have occurred. The fact that it's close in time would not void the mandate that would be placed on states as to these federal elections.
Well, and so one of the questions that came up, it was about, well, doesn't the bill overturn Citizens United? Well, that, back to you to answer that question.
Well, as you know, Citizens United, one of the worst decisions the Supreme Court has reached, did eviscerate campaign finance reform. That can only be overturned through a constitutional amendment or a better Supreme Court. And obviously, it cannot be overturned by mere legislation. However, in that decision, the court itself said the remedy was transparency. And so that's what we do in this bill. We make how the money is spent, who's spending it, transparent. We preclude coordination in ways that are deceptive. And that's all we can do with legislation, absent a Supreme Court. And the current court does not look like they've come to their senses, or a constitutional amendment, which is so almost impossible to do.
Thank you, Zoe. I just want to, Zoe has clearly presented what the opportunity is. She also is a daily reminder to us of the urgency of it all. This is very urgent. Our democracy is at stake. We're not here to be fearmongers. We're here, though, to make sure we honor our oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, a democracy for whom a part of which is the sanctity of the vote to be respected. And so when we talk about Citizens United being the worst Supreme Court decision, I think there are more bad things to come from that court. All the more reason for us to have strong Democratic majorities in the House and in the Senate, and certainly a Democratic president. I wish elections weren't so important, that one party wins, another wins, we have our debate. But this isn't about that. This is about either you honor the Constitution or you do not. Now, Tiffany Muller, who started End Citizens United, is very much a part of the initiative to pass the legislation in the House and in the Senate that Zoe has discussed. She knows that unless we can get end that, it is, really is crippling for our country. But you can't do it without three-quarters majority in the Congress. The Constitution clearly only has 3 places where you need more than a simple majority. Approving ambassadors, approving treaties, not ambassadors, treaties,
Impeachment.
convicting a president or anyone else of who has been impeached, and amending the Constitution. Other than that, a simple majority is in the Constitution. Right now, the customs of the Senate are standing in the way of our passing legislation. I was very encouraged by Chuck Schumer's letter this morning that talked about how we were going to proceed, and that the Senate had to use the word evolve. And let's hope that that evolution starts very soon with the opportunity for us to pass this legislation. Really, I want to emphasize a point that Zoe made. When we talk about redistricting and what this legislation needs, the urgency of now is that if we pass it now, the further redistricting or our opportunities in court for some redistricting that has already taken place are greatly enhanced if the criteria that are in the bill for redistricting, whether it's voting rights, constitution, community of interest, it really makes the hand stronger for a fairer redistricting. Zoe, did you want to speak to that piece?
And extreme partisanship. And so that's why the sooner, the better. We have recourse to the 3-judge panel in the District of Columbia to enforce this provision. But the sooner we do that, the better. I mean, if this is passed, after the next election, obviously that will be very difficult to implement. So I think it is essential, and I gather from Mr. Schumer's letter today, he understands that speed is important. And if we could get this passed in the Senate this month, I know that we can pass it, whatever they do, in the House, and the president will sign it, and we will have helped to secure our democracy for generations to come.
Well, the fact is, we did pass the original bills very early on in this new in this Congress, and we're waiting for the Senate to follow suit. Now they will amend the bill, and of course, we're working with them to make sure the amendments are, as you suggested, in furtherance of preserving the sanctity of the vote and the elections. Tiffany Muller from Citizens United has been joining Eric Holder being head of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. That is there to make sure that we have redistricting that is objective. We're not there to do to the Republicans what they did to us. We're there to have objective redistricting. And Eric Holder has been remarkable. He helped us pass H.R. 1 in the House. He's trying to help us to do just that in the Senate. But he is a national voice for redistricting, and in the community, in the courts, and across the country, and certainly in the Congress of the United States. So we're really blessed that he has taken this lead in terms of redistricting and fairness in our elections.
Well, he's been a tremendous resource to us and his whole team. I'm so grateful. I mean, he certainly has put in his time of public service. He could be doing other things, but he's never given up on protecting our democracy. So a tremendous resource for truth and for justice.
And President Obama has been so helpful with that, as well as Governor Terry McAuliffe of Virginia was one of the originators of the idea that we go down this path. I just want to go to COVID because Zoe knows that the numbers are growing in the House of in the Congress. Zoe, did you want to speak to public policy and COVID and what we anticipate in the weeks ahead?
Well, we have actually a testing site in the Congress for institutional employees, staff, as well as members of Congress to go in. Testing is essential. And if we find positive tests, we do contact tracing to try and make sure that we suppress this virus. We've seen a gigantic jump in the presence of Omicron as compared to the Delta virus. In just a week, it went from hardly any to 70%. We have seen a rapid increase in the positivity tests. The virus is racing through, the House of Representatives, and we need to maintain our posture of caution while continuing to legislate. Very much of the staff is on remote work where they can be. I know, for example, my committee staff and personal staff are working from home most of the time, but there are some people who can't work from home. Obviously, the Capitol Police have to be physically present. So we're making sure that we do our very best to protect those who physically must be in the Capitol through adhering to the advice the attending physician has provided. We have, I think, if not 100%, close to 100% of the Democratic members have been vaccinated and boosted. Unfortunately, some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have declined to get that protection and continue to pose a threat to the rest of us. We have imposed a mask mandate for anybody in the building and on the floor. Unfortunately, some of our colleagues who are sort of performance artist members of Congress more than legislators have refused to wear masks, and we are instituting fines for those who refuse to take this simple step to protect others. I know that some members will physically gather on the 6th, and that's important because that attack on our democracy cannot be allowed to just pass by unrecognized. But all these steps will be taken to make sure that those who are physically present are protected. And I encourage everyone who can to participate virtually, and that is with virtue and virtually.
Well, thank you. So I do want to commend President Biden for what he is doing, because he is insisting on testing, and we need to get more tests available. Today was first day back to school, well, for my granddaughter, Bella, in public school in San Francisco, and she had to be tested to go back to school. So I know all moms and dads and family members with children in school want them to be in school safely. So testing. We've been saying that for nearly 2 years, for 22 months. Testing across the country. On Friday, the FDA approved the booster shot for younger children. Hopefully this week the CDC will give the go-ahead, but it will be available later in the week. So again, testing, vaccination, spatial distancing, as well as wearing masks, very important for us to crush this new version, this new variant of the virus. But again, it is something that the more it is transmitted, the more it mutates, and that causes other variants. So what we want to do is stop the transmittal, and that is masks, spatial distancing, vaccinations, and testing. And that is, again, what the president has been advocating, and we have to do more. And we have to help other countries, because we are never safe unless we are all safe. And he has put forth initiatives in that regard. And in the Congress, we have to provide the funds to do just that. And that's what Rosa DeLauro is working on in the Appropriations Committee. May I just go to January 6th for a moment to invite all of you to our live streaming on that day. On that day, we have a series of events that are public. The first one begins at 12 o'clock noon, and the House floor. We will have a pro forma session where only the speaker is allowed to speak. So I will be making a January 6th statement at that time. And then later at 1 o'clock, we will have, it's 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Okay, now, thank you. Reminded to, that's Eastern Standard Time. At 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we'll have something that is, I think, very beautiful. we started this program with music, I believe the arts are something that are so unifying for us, so uplifting for all of us. So we'll have some music, and then we will hear from historians to talk about the narrative of our country's democracy and January 6th. That'll be John Meacham. It will be Doris Kearns Goodwin, and that will be moderated by the Librarian of Congress. And so we're very honored with that, with what we'll have then. And following that, we will have testimonials from some of our members who were really very affected on January 6th by their proximity to the hoarding, the masses that were coming to harm the members of Congress, and we'll hear from them. Later in the day, as soon as it gets a little bit darker, we will have a candlelight vigil, 5:30 Eastern Standard Time, on the steps of the Capitol. It won't be speeches, it'll be prayers and music, but it'll be about patriotism, love of our country, and again, the value that it is to the world, our democracy. And so that's what we have there. Earlier in the day, as you probably saw an announcement from the White House, the president and the vice president will come to the Capitol to speak to the nation. And that is a time that will be announced by them, but it will be before all of the things that I just mentioned. But what I mentioned, that will be nationally broadcast. What I mentioned will be live streamed, and we'll be in touch with you about how to access that. But it's going to be a lovely day, and I'm so honored that the historians have agreed to give us the narrative, put it in perspective for us. It's going to be a very special occasion. It's very sad. We must pass the legislation to protect our democracy. We must protect our Capitol and our Constitution so it doesn't happen again. And all of those presentations will be happening this week from the Capitol Police and the rest. So again, I want all of us to know that there are across the country, and many of them on this call, entities who amplify our voices. They should be supported. Understand that anything that we have on TV or that you see in your local activism can be amplified. And amplify is our word. Urgency is our timetable. And again, nothing more eloquent to a member of Congress than the voice of his or her own constituents. So when you're being active about legislation, Congress and Senate, House and Senate, but also others to call their own members of Congress. Again, we don't agonize, we organize, but we want to make sure that we are effective and we get the desired results. We want you to be part of our message. Democrats deliver. That we cannot accept what the Republicans vote no and take the dough and go out there and act as if they voted for something. And again, we want to do so in a way that is unifying for our great country. So in the spirit of recognizing that the arts are so unifying, we're going to end our program with Paula West honoring us with spirited song. But before I do, I want to yield to Zoe for any closing remarks she may have.
Well, I'll just say this. We have a lot of challenges, and it's easy to be concerned and worried and fearful, but we also have a lot of power. We have the capacity to save ourselves and our country. And when I look at the hundreds of people that are on this meeting, it encourages me that so many of you care about our country. You understand what the stakes are. You're willing to work for our future. And I'll tell you, I am too. And with leadership like Nancy Pelosi, we'll never give up. And I think we can prevail. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Kwanzaa, the like. Let's have a 2022 that is way better than the last 2 years.
Thank you very much, Zoe. Yes, thank you for acknowledging the power of the grassroots. We had hoped to get 500 people. We have over 1,500 people on the call taking the time today. And as we prepare for our next meeting, please let us know what your priority is as to what you would like to hear about. Of course, BBB, we must pass. Voting rights, of course, the most important legislation that we must pass as well. And again, to put forth the message that Democrats deliver. But we look forward to joining you. Hope we will all join together soon, pretty soon. But again, don't be shy. You never are. I've taken down some of the things you've said in the chat as to where we go from here. But let's make this a regular occasion so that we can hear from you. And again, echo what you're thinking as well as what the President of the United States is putting forth. I'm very proud of our members of Congress, the House Democrats. They're so great. They're so courageous. And I have to make sure that they stay in the majority. With that, I want to yield and again thank Hope and Cheryl for their interpreting for us today. Wish you all a very healthy and happy New Year. Stay safe and let's be in touch on a regular basis so that we can hold the House and increase our numbers in the House and Senate in preparation for a Democratic president to follow. With that, I yield to Paula West with gratitude for her always being available to make it beautiful for us. Now she's going to sing. I'll let her tell. We'll hear the name of the song when she starts to sing. Paula, thank you.
Gray skies are gonna clear up, put on a happy face, brush off those clouds and cheer up, put on a happy face. Forget that gloomy mask of tragedy, it's not your style. You look so good that you'll be glad you decided to smile. Pick out a pleasant outlook, stick up that noble chin, brush off that full of doubt look, slap on a happy grin, and vote and spread sunshine all over the place if you put on a happy face. Clouds and cheer up, put on a happy face. Forget that gloomy mask of tragedy, it's not your style. You'll look so good that you'll be glad you decided to smile. I've met a boy so gloomy, he'd never laugh or sing. He'd never listen to me. now he's a mean old thing. So spread sunshine all over the place. You put out